Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and orientations, and welcome back to another Doctor Who review. And today's Doctor Who review is another double Ravenous review, so we haven't got a lot of time, but we've got a lot to get through. Who's ready? Alonzi. In Ravenous 3, we start off with a story called Deep Time. Now, Deep Time is kind of a base under siege story. Essentially what's happened is the Doctor, Liv and Helen land on a planet that's going to get detonated by the Time Lords, and the Doctor bumps into an old friend of his. Meanwhile, he also finds out the fact that apparently this old friend of his hasn't heard from a trooper in a very long time, assuming that maybe they were just under some sort of unrest. When the trooper returns, the trooper points out that they were attacked by the Ravenous. The Doctor's friend doesn't believe the fact that the Ravenous exist, and so the Doctor has to try and convince him. But when the Ravenous turn up, they finally realise that the Ravenous was feeding on this creature, and of course, waiting to devour them later down the line. The Doctor, Liv and Helen have to find a way off of the planet without the Ravenous consuming them, and of course, with everything that's going on and the fact that the Ravenous are getting closer and closer, and it feels like no matter where the Doctor goes, because the Ravenous can slip through time, it makes it difficult to escape them, as they could be anywhere, any place, any time, any reality. The Doctor also talks about this myth behind the Ravenous, this idea that they are one, a clan, and two, not just a clan, but they also were kind of born in the vortex. This is just off of prior knowledge that he knows from the history of Rassilon. The Doctor, Liv and Helen eventually manage to get off this rock, but the Doctor and his companions find themselves split due to the 11. The 11 goes off with the Doctor in hopes of maybe meeting up with his friends once again at some point, but never quite knowing exactly when they will bump into one another. The second story, Companion Piece, follows us going back in time a little bit to meet the 11's previous self, the 9. The 9 has been going around through time and space picking up individuals of the Doctor's companions, kidnapping them for a greater purpose. A purpose which, as the story progresses, we soon come to know. But little does the 9 realise that Professor Riversong, one of the companions captured by the 9, happens to have a plan in play. Her plan is essentially to make the 9 pick up certain individual companions in hopes of breaking free from his grasp. The 9 picks up all sorts of companions from the Doctor's timeline. Jamie, Zoe, Victoria, Jo Grant, Sarah, all of them. Any companion you can name, he's most probably picked up in this story, minus 2 very convenient companions who don't get picked up, to my knowledge. One of those companions being Frobisher, because, I don't know, maybe the 9 has something against talking penguins, who are epic, by the way, and Keris. The 9 points out that he believes Keris to be a bit of a psychopath when he talks to Charlotte Pollard, and Charlotte Pollard backchats him and says, no, you are the psycho. The 9 also constantly seems to poison Charlotte Pollard during the process of this episode, which you can imagine pretty much really pisses her off. And Charlotte eventually gets her revenge on the 9 when her, Bliss, and Liv Chenka and Helen all gang up with Professor Riversong against the 9. But there's a snag in this story which I find beautifully brilliant. So, Bliss is met during the height of the birth of the Time War, sort of ish. The Doctor meets Bliss on Earth and pretty much takes her off into the stars, and then a whole catastrophe happens and Bliss's timeline is switched, which is very funny when the 9 tries to pick her up, because the 9 picks her up before all of these events take place. So essentially Bliss has no knowledge of who the Doctor is, who the 9 is, or exactly why she got kidnapped. All she knows is she's pissed, a bunch of girls are helping her to escape, and she's going to kick some ass. The third story in this box set, Legend, is about a professor from another planet who is sort of like a giant grasshopper, and she disguises herself as a human being to meet two of the greatest book writers, the brothers Grimm. So essentially, she only turns up on Earth to try and investigate them and find out about all these folklores. But her ship starts to play havoc and essentially starts turning everything around it and the surrounding villages into fairy tales. Now, the Doctor absolutely loves this because he starts eating pieces of a gingerbread house. The 11 gets very agitated. Meanwhile, Liv and Helen begin to investigate more and more into the story of the Brothers Grimm. Liv isn't quite too sure about them, but Helen absolutely adores them. She remembers learning their bedtime stories and all the sorts of folk tales that they picked up over the years. Eventually, with the help of the Brothers Grimm, the Doctor, Liv, Helen, and the 11 manage to save the day, whilst the 11 pretends that all of his bad thoughts have gone away. Right, quick apologies. Retcon what I said before about the 11 pretending that he's good. Yeah, well, he pretends he is good in this box set, but the other bit was nonsense so far. So essentially, then the Doctor and the 11 and everyone lands on an Abbey planet in which they try and find a solution to the Ravenous. They find this portal and they find this abbot. Little do they know that the abbot is secretly the 11's previous incarnation, the 9. The 9 sends Liv and right. The 9 sends Helen and the Doctor down a cave system in which the Ravenous are waiting for them. Meanwhile, whilst the 11 is just kind of taking his time and enjoying the scenery, Liv gets caught up with the abbot, and the abbot reveals himself to be the 9. Liv gets knocked out and then chucked down a well, in which she tries to help the Doctor escape from the Ravenous. Meanwhile, the 11 and the 9 bicker over something and begin to plan a new course of action after stealing the Doctor's TARDIS. Or at least trying to, until all of that backfires. So at some point in the timeline of both these box sets, the 9 is consumed by the Ravenous. Well, at least thought to be consumed by the Ravenous, then turns up as the Abbot. And, right, this is all getting a bit confusing, isn't it? But let's just say the 9 gets consumed, then turns up as the Abbot after pretty much revealing he was never eaten in the first place. But then the Ravenous come after him again, and so the 11 then goes off with the Doctor and Liv and Helen for another adventure, in which Liv then picks up on the fact that the 11's voices are still in his head very subtly, but because of this incident in the episode Whisper, he has to help Liv out because they both want to survive, especially being stuck on a planet in which the only creature seems to react to sound. Gore, that was a lot to get out, wasn't it? Right. So essentially, they end up on this planet. The whole inhabitants, because the planet has been eating itself, turns out there was no monster in the woods and the planet's just eating itself. And so they have to find a way to survive and get people off of the planet. Then we move on once again to the Planet of Dust. The Planet of Dust is pretty much a dictator story. What's happened is Jeffrey Beaver's master has essentially taken over the whole planet, looking for a lost tomb of Artron. Artron, for anyone who doesn't know who they are, we will explain in the next story. But essentially, they go looking for this tomb and force all these different people to start digging up bits of the planet. And every time they dig up bits of the planet, the Master offers them water. When the Doctor, Liv, Helen, and the 11 turn up, the 11 goes looking for the Renegade, of course, being the Master. And essentially, the Doctor, Liv, and Helen are put out as water thieves. Liv manages to escape this fate by pretty much being off with the 11 for a while. Meanwhile, Helen, the Doctor and a bunch of other people get put up on these giant stakes in a desert. The Doctor then crosses paths with the Master and figures out exactly what's been going on and realizes that the only way to move forward is to crush the Master's dictatorship. After crushing the Master's dictatorship, the 11 steals the Doctor's ship and pretty much uses the Ravenous to start consuming all sorts of bits of creation, and that is when we get to what's about to happen next. So, Day of the Master. Before we get anywhere further into Day of the Master, I think it's crucial that I explain exactly who Artron is. Artron was the founder of Artron Energy. For anyone who doesn't know what Artron Energy is in the Doctor Who universe, essentially it is the space-time continuum which allows the TARDIS to move through the vortex without being ripped apart. With me so far? Okay, great. So, continuing on with the story, essentially, the Doctor gets absolutely heartbroken after being almost destroyed by the 11 and the Ravenous. He is left stranded with Liv and Helen goes off thinking that she finds River Song. Little does she realise she's just about to be captured by Missy. Meanwhile, after knowing that the Master is thought to be dead, the Doctor and Liv go in the Master's TARDIS in search of a way to essentially fix everything that has gone wrong. When the Doctor goes off, he lands on a space station which used to belong to the Master after slaughtering a bunch of people. This space station conveniently is the Crucible of Souls. The Doctor leaves Liv in hopes that maybe she will survive and the Time Lords will not let her interfere in the events that are to come. The Master turns up and points out to Liv that he pretty much slaughtered the place, but he doesn't tell her at first that he's the Master. He pretends to play along with the fact that she thinks that a Time Lord has been sent by the CIA. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the Doctor ends up going off and landing on a planet that shouldn't exist, a planet within the vortex, in which on this planet he comes across another incarnation of the Master, played by Eric Roberts, and he comes across Artron, the guy that everyone has been searching for from the very beginning of the last story. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the 11 has been going through and essentially trashing the universe with the Ravenous. After reversing the polarity of the neutron flow of the Crucible of Souls, he has caused everyone in the universe not to be able to truly die. By doing this, he gives the Ravenous tons and tons to feed on. Meanwhile, elsewhere, back on the place that Artron was on, we find out that Artron accidentally made the Ravenous through using these creatures against the Master because the Master tried to use them for an alternative purpose. Artron and the Doctor escape. Missy and Helen are on a planet searching for Artron because they believe him to be some kind of god or deity. Missy can't go any further because of the fact that Artron has cut himself off from the rest of the universe, even forgetting his own name. Then Missy eventually manages to turn up. She stuns him and starts hunting down Helen. After failing to hunt down Helen, all of the Masters start meeting up and start discussing plans and realise that there's one person in all of it they need to deal with from the get-go. But the only thing is, they don't want to get any close to him, because if they get too close to him, they will be eaten by the Ravenous. And if they get eaten by the Ravenous, it's bye-bye, evil villain. As the story continues, we also find out the fact that this is not the first time Helen has met Artron, but she didn't know it was him. She just met him back in time as a genie who seemed to be granting wishes. Right, now we move on to part 2. After the Master figures out that everyone in the universe can't die, he calls on his other selves in hopes of fixing the problem that was caused. He also finds out the fact that Artron was a lost soul who shouldn't exist, and he begins to realise that the only way to fix and correct the universe is to use Artron to wish everything back to the way it should be. When Artron is brought to the very far future, or whenever this is set, he finds the Ravenous and is horrified by what his creation has become. He knows that the Doctor warned him and that he mentioned that something like this had happened, but he didn't realise to what extent. The Doctor then points out to him the fact that the only way to beat the Ravenous is to wish them out of existence and wish back the species that they used to be. Artron does this and everything is restored back to normal. The 11 is horrified and of course tries to flee in the Master's TARDIS, but little does he realise that 3 Masters have been waiting in the console room, waiting in the dark, waiting for him. And they all begin to shoot their laser screwdrivers at him. They then dump him back on the station that was going to be destroyed by a bunch of battle TARDISes, and the Doctor, Liv and Helen escape. Meanwhile, the 11 gets ready for his 12th incarnation. Elsewhere though, the mission for the Masters is not exactly over. After a promise that they were allowed by the Time Lords to destroy the Ravenous and pervert the course of history, the Master was granted one wish, and that was to save his previous incarnation, the Geoffrey Beevers Master, who would eventually go on to become the Alex McQueen Master. But of course, after resurrecting the Beevers Master and allowing him to regenerate, they can't exactly say that they are his future incarnations. Instead, they must tell their past that they are part of the CIA and let history take its natural course. Right, apologies to everyone, that was a lot to get through, but we got there in the end. So, this was a double whammy of Ravenous 3 and Ravenous 4. So what did I think of the first box set? Well, I felt like the first box set had its ups and downs. I really liked the Grimm story. I really liked the story about the companions kind of coming together and battling a villain. Those were my 2 standout stories in that box set. I also liked the little scene at the end of that box set with the Abbot being revealed to be the 11's previous incarnation. Especially after the story kind of started off with this weird, eerie idea of maybe them not being around. So what do I give Ravenous 3 out of 10? Well, as I said, my standouts were the Legend and Thing. Other than that, the other 2 stories were a bit up and down, and for that reason, I have to give Ravenous 3 a solid 7 out of 10. Ravenous 4, I feel like, was a much stronger box set between the 2 of these. I did like the companion piece in the last box set, but I really feel like what brings this box set more a stronger high point is the idea of the Whisper really gave me the idea of like stories like Midnight. Planet of Dust reminded me of just Turn Left and any Doctor Who story which has brought up the subject of dictatorships. Day of the Master hits it out of the park, not only because it introduces Artron, a character that explains so much about the TARDIS, but also because it gives us these great moments with characters like Missy, the War Master, and the Master from the TV movie. All 3 Masters absolutely hit out the park. Eric Roberts has always gave me this kind of Terminator vibe. Derek Jacobi has always given me this sinister, but kind of inviting character. Missy has always been that maniacal brilliance, and the way that Michelle Gomez just switches up every now and then with her character, this idea of her being a lovable, funny character to also, I could get rid of you because I can get anyone I want, sort of vibe, is brilliant. And for that reason, I give Ravenous 4 a solid 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next Doctor Who review. Until then, stay beautiful. Allons-y, you beautiful Whovians.